It's time for Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless time.
Democrat running for council in Upper Manhattan denies being an anti-Semite.
But he does admit to being a liar.
If Hillary Clinton would have won the presidency, I don't think you'd be hearing a word about any Russian involvement in our elections.
I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character.
Rumor is that Google has already replaced the employee. In the spirit of diversity, she's actually a single black mother, transgender, pansexual, undocumented immigrant with a PhD in women's studies, and she has rickets. So she is a modern marvel.
That the only reason it exists was to have a strong female at the forefront of the Avengers. But they prioritize that over good writing. I say this about comics too, and how they sacrifice good storytelling and character building for non-white male characters by overemphasizing their minority status.
It's a standard ploy of the Democrats. Whenever they lose, they won't accept it.
It's time for Johnny and the Professor.
Here you have someone who falsely claimed to be an historically oppressed minority in order to get a job reserved for members of that group, American Indians. Totally lied in order to make money, and that's cool. And yet someone who jokes about it is the bigot. Like, how does that work exactly?
We know that Obama colluded with Russia when he basically told Medvedev, hey, when the American people are out of sight, I'm going to make a deal with Putin. We know that Hillary colluded with Russia. She took money in exchange for the whole uranium deal. The one person who has not colluded with Russia, at least as far as we know, is Trump.
Yet again, our corporate media has been caught frothing with hysteria over a false story.
Johnny and the Professor.
It's Johnny and the Professor.
Common sense for senseless times.
And we talk politics, pop culture, and poinsettias. Or is it poinsettia?
It's poinsettia, I believe. But
see, I started out hearing poinsettia, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it could have been those leftist whack jobs. So, no, it's poinsettia. You know what I mean?
Well, what we don't want to be is pusillanimous poltroons.
Okay. What is that?
Pusillanimous is cowardly, and a poltroon is... It's a cowardly coward, basically.
Cowardly coward? Okay.
But we want to be paragons of perspicacity.
Or Judge Pirro.
Judge Pirro, who we're having on later on in the show today. I finished reading her book, and I very much enjoyed it. Now, I'm a historian, so I have historian geeky aspects of it. I finished her book, and I got to the end. She cited every quote she did in it. You went through the back, and she had what's called works cited. Mm-hmm. Every person she quoted, everything she did, dated, timed exactly. And she put an index in the book if you want to go back and check something. As a historian, I go, that was one of the ways I could always tell somebody who is actually trying to give you information and someone's just trying to blow smoke out their butt.
Right.
Definitely she wanted to give us information. It was a very interesting book. No holds barred. I mean, she comes right out and talks about the fact that she believes there's a deep state conspiracy to undermine President Trump. In her first book she talked about, that was called Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. But in the second book she actually gets into the reconstruction of America. It's called Radicals, Resistance, and Revenge, the Left's Plot to Remake America. Good, solid points about social media, about the issues they're having with that, how that it's becoming a force to limit conservative thinking. The whole deep state people, the Brennan and the Clappers and the Comeys going after Trump, the whole Russia nonsense that was was just a lot of pure BS. And out of that's going to come some warrants, I think, eventually. I wouldn't be surprised to see in the future that Clapper and Brennan and Comey may find themselves in pinstripe suits, and they'll be the kind that you have. You
don't think their buddies on their side are going to pull strings to make sure? Well, I mean, look with the Clintons. They've avoided arrest on so many different things.
Well, the problem with that is that it's Bill Barr is the problem for that. Bill Barr has assigned a neutral entity to actually investigate the abuses of the FISA court.
But are they truly a neutral entity?
Well, the gentleman, I'm throwing a blank on his name right now, but I read his bio. He's investigated the FBI and the CIA before. He's a man who's been involved with indictment of agents in the past. And Barr chose him, I think, specific for the purpose of saying they lied to the court. They went to the FISA court and they didn't give them all the information they needed to. And when you do that, when you present something to a court like the FISA court, the government's required to give all the information that is pertinent to it. They called it ex parte, meaning one representative. They didn't do that. I mean, do you think that we're giving you information on this report, this Steele dossier, that was called forth by Hillary Clinton's people and paid for, and it has Russian inside information that's propaganda? I think that could be a significant point to it, and none of that was mentioned. So, I mean, these people were obviously trying to just get a warrant to investigate Trump, to undermine his presidency, to try to either get him out or not get him elected. I news you, that's a felony.
Oh.
I think we will see something. It'll be interesting to see once it gets to the end of this FISA court investigation is whether or not who starts turning on each other. And that's where you'll get somebody falling for sure. Comey may be the only one who goes to jail. Everyone else will turn on him. But eventually that'll happen, because it always happens when you have conspirators in any type of a rat sinking the ship scenario. Somebody's going to squeal on somebody else.
Let's hope, right?
Let's hope, because it would be a good thing to... You don't want the intelligence community deciding who's going to be the president of the United States. That's the job of the American people.
Well, just the hearings that they had with the FBI, I mean, just those revealed a lot, I thought.
Oh, they did. There was a lot of strange things. You're looking at them going, you guys are doing what? And why are we involved in this?
Right.
When I was reading Judge Jeanine's book, I was just taken with the fact that she makes arguments against the candidates, how they're embracing the more socialist, the more radical end. She brings in immigration, how the immigration is now suddenly become a big issue. It was, 10 years ago, Barack Obama was saying, oh, well, we can't let anyone come across the border.
This year, the Senate passed an immigration reform bill by a wide bipartisan majority, and it addresses the key issues that need to be addressed. It would strengthen our borders. It would level the playing field by holding employers accountable if they knowingly hire undocumented workers, make it easier to attract highly skilled entrepreneurs from beyond our borders. It would make sure that everybody plays by the same rules by providing a pathway to earn citizenship, a path that includes passing a background check and learning English and paying taxes and a penalty and getting in line behind it, everyone trying to come here the right way.
Clinton was saying that too, Bill Clinton.
All Americans are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
Now that the Democrats need voters, then the issue suddenly is, oh, well, then everyone needs to come across.
And get voting rights.
And get voting rights. And again, though, the point they miss on that is you can't give them federal voting rights because only citizens of the United States are allowed to vote. But I know for a fact, having lived in California, that when I went to vote, I would walk up to the voting station and I would say, I'm Stephen Arms, and they'd look me up on a list, and I'd say I'm at 913 West College, or what I think was my address, and that was it. Then they handed my form and walked away. I'd go for my license or something. Oh, no, we can't look at your ID.
That's puzzling to me.
Well, it's not puzzling if you want illegals to vote.
Right, or dead people.
Or dead people, or people, whatever. You want someone to misrepresent the voter and come in and vote for them. Because you can find out who actually votes in elections. I mean, that is part of public records. You can go back and check on it. It's a little bit difficult, but I know that the political parties know whether someone voted and who and how they lean and when's the last time they voted. If you can get that information, then if you know the person hasn't voted in 10 years but they're still registered, how hard would it be to send someone to be in their place? I'm saying, are you saying the Democratic Committee would do that? I think that the leftists in this country would do anything to acquire power. And that's the point of the judge's book.
Now, wait, what about the right? Would they do the same thing?
I don't think so. And that's a weird thing. And you're saying, well, you're being biased. No, because right now, if a leftist is speaking, how many times do you hear about conservatives coming and shutting down some leftist speaking?
You don't hear about that at all because it doesn't happen.
Because it doesn't happen. And that's the point. It's like Milo Yiannopoulos will be, protested, screamed at him, whatever. Hell, Australia forbid him from coming into their country. But yet, on the other hand, if Hillary Clinton's going to go out and talk, who protests in front of there going, how many lock it up people are blocking her speeches?
Nobody.
And the answer is nobody. So that would be the argument in a simple way. What are you willing to get power? Are you willing to take away other people's free speech as a method of getting power? And I think that's what we're talking about. And again, that's one of the issues we're dealing in the book here, is that there's an indication of illegals coming in so they can pad the voting polls. And also another factor, the reason for illegals, is that the Democrats are beginning to see Donald Trump as president, his popularity amongst black voters is twice what Republicans did in the past.
Democrats are losing the African American vote. They've always relied on that ever since the Great Society Act. It comes in 95%. Right. 95%. I've always thought that was amazing. Think about 95% of anything anyone agrees with. I mean, you can't get 95% of people agree on the color of an orange, but you can get 95% of vote to vote for Democrats. If there's an erosion of the black vote in America, even 5%, unless the Democrats can pad that with something else, they're going to lose. And then that's the fear, I think. If you're truly afraid of losing power, what are you willing to do to keep it? Especially if you believe the people on the other side are not wrong, they are evil. And that's the big difference between a leftist and a conservative. A conservative disagrees with you, but doesn't think you're a bad person unless you actually are a bad person. A leftist says, you say, I disagree with you, well, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a capitalist, you're whatever particular bigot, whatever one you want to throw out. And therefore it's easy to hate you. They hate you, they make you the racist. From a racist, it's a Nazi. From a Nazi, punch a Nazi. Well, if you can punch a Nazi, you might as well club a Nazi. Mm-hmm. If you can club a Nazi, you might as well kill a Nazi. Man, you're pretty harsh.
Well, it's a simple progression of thought. Once you believe someone is evil, what would you do to destroy someone who you know is evil? And the answer is you would do it by any means necessary. And I hear that. Antifa talks that way. It talks about stopping it by any means necessary. And Antifa is that seems to be on the left last time I looked.
Ouch.
Now, on the other side of it, something that's interesting in the news is that there was a special election in North Carolina. There was a race between the Republican candidate is Dan Bishop. Looked like it was too close to call. They didn't think he was going to pull it off. The Democrat might have been able to win. And, of course, the media, CNN, MSNBC, were saying this could be a bellwether election. This could be a foreshadowing of the 2020 election. And Donald Trump went down there, he did a campaign rally for the guy, and he won. Dan Bishop won soundly. Not even a recount issue type of thing.
Oh, they didn't cry and complain?
Oh, no. He won by too much. He won by like 7,000 votes or something. There's a point. There isn't any point in counting it.
Okay.
But again, and the media immediately went silent about it, because apparently it's no longer a bellwether election. It's no longer an indication of what's going to happen in 2020. Though I think probably it is an indication of what's going to happen in 2020.
I just don't see how the average person doesn't see what's happening.
Well, again, people will look upon their sources of information. I have a lot of friends that I know who are, probably moderate individuals, but they only watch one source of news, and they don't get an accurate opinion. They're not willing to go that one step further to realize that it's not the case. They're not telling you the truth. Because of that, I'm willing to cut general people slack for it. Then again, people who are obsessed, people who are fanatics, people who believe that Trump is bad as Hitler. What it is ignorance of history. The people don't have any idea what a Nazi even looks like anymore. Because it's been so long ago, people don't even think about it. I've studied history. I know what Nazis did. I know what Nazis look like. Even the people who claim to be Nazis in America now, they are kittens compared to the tigers that were in the Third Reich. The true Nazis were monsters.
But the media and the narrative is that all conservatives are monsters.
Apparently. Well, if that's the case, then maybe the dominant form needs to be monster. Projection is what we're talking about here in psychology. When you actually look at somebody else, you attribute to them attributes, you're projecting your own attributes on them. That's a psychological term. I took a lot of psych classes when I was in school. I thought about being a psych major, but I deduced I wasn't crazy enough to be a psychologist. So the projection is the idea. That could be one explanation of it, is they know them in their hearts that they are rotten human beings, so therefore everyone must be a rotten human being. So I look at it when you're talking about attributing these horrible values to people that have done nothing to earn them. I'm sorry, if you're a rapist or a killer or a murderer or a child molester, yeah, you're a horrible human being, but people who've done that have done that because they've committed crimes. Disagreeing with whether or not you want to regulate your border does not make you a monster.
Right.
But again, if you're in the left, I guess apparently it does. But anyway, so it'll be interesting to see. One thing about the 2020 election, and I thought about when I was reading this thing dealing with Dan Bishop's election, the one I just was talking about, is that I honestly hope, and people would say, well, you're being a partisan, and I go, no, I'm not actually. I honestly hope that in the 2020 election, the Republicans win soundly. One, it historically hasn't happened that many times in the past. So as a historian, I find it interesting. But the reason is not because, oh, you're a partisan, you want the Republicans. I do think the Democrats, as they're creating themselves now, as they're incarnating themselves now, are a danger to this country. The policies they're following will hurt America. And I think the only way they're going to change is if they get a total beatdown in the election in 2020. Maybe they'll actually step back and say, maybe we don't want to be following Bernie Sanders. Maybe we don't want to be saying that Venezuela is a great form of government. Maybe we don't want to be saying that we can't have a border. Maybe it'd be nice to have a Democratic Party that actually moves back to being liberals rather than leftists, and actually can be discussed on issues where you can argue, you'll agree on the things that are right, and you'll argue with how you get there. Because if they don't, the Democratic Party, if they lose in 2020, if they don't make a reformation and fix their party, they're doomed. They're going to fade away. They're going to probably fragment into smaller parties. I like the idea of having a dialogue between parties, having to negotiate to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Now, there was a time where Ronald Reagan and the Speaker of the House,
Tip O'Neill,
they could argue passionately about their views, but then after they clock off, they could still go into a bar and have a beer and just leave that stuff at work, but still have camaraderie, rapport.
The idea is that they could separate their politics from their personal life.
Right.
People don't do that now. And again, that isn't really true, because I, as a classical liberal, moderate conservative, whatever you want to call me, I have no problem being friends with people that are leftists. I have no problem with being people that are more conservative than I am. I even like discussing it and stuff, but you can't, because people get angry and their blood pressure goes up and they get fighting and stuff.
Right.
Again, the main reason is the ones on the left. The ones on the left, they do not want to hear your argument, because they know their arguments don't work, because their idea is based on emotion. You always know when you're dealing with the left is because it's I feel.
Right.
And again, what you feel is irrelevant. Your feelings have no effect on me whatsoever. I mean, I don't want to be cruel about it, but that's the truth. I'm not concerned about how you feel. I'm concerned about what you think. I feel that there are too many hungry people in this country, or I feel that the homeless need to be helped. I feel that too. My answer is, okay, now what are you going to do to do it? Let's talk about a solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is not letting them run around in the streets defecating and shooting up and giving them drugs and letting them live in squalor conditions that you can't even find in a second world nation. You'd have to go to a third world nation to find how poorly our homeless live.
I understand, and I could be wrong. You're the historian. You're the facts guy. I'm the feelings guy. That our poor are still in the top 1% globally.
Our poor are, yes. I mean, homeless is another level. Once you get down to the level of being totally homeless.
Yeah, but our poor,
right,
our poverty.
If you take a poverty level American, they would be, their middle class or better in most of the nations of the world.
Of the world.
Of the world.
Our poverty, our poor people are still wealthier in our horrible capitalist society than the rest of the world.
They are. And yet the Bernie Sanders, when screaming about the evils of capitalism as he has his millions of dollars in his 3 houses.
Right. He stopped saying millionaire, though.
Oh, no, he is millionaire.
Millionaire and billionaire, millionaire and billionaire. Now it's just billionaire.
Billionaire. You got that Bernie Sanders line. In the last 20 years in the world, the overall standard of living in the world has raised about 30%. Even in the poor areas are getting better. And again, and that's a direct byproduct of capitalism. It's not socialism doing it. Socialism doesn't do anything but take the money from somebody, one person, and give it to another.
Right.
Socialism doesn't grow. Now you go, well, the Soviet Union was okay. I go, yeah, because it was 100% communism, which is, like socialism will become, is a dictatorship. And sure, dictatorships can take people's money and make things grow really well. The Nazis were really good at it. That was a dictatorship. So was Mao. So was Stalin. But it doesn't change the fact it's a dictatorship. It's capitalism that actually makes the money, and that's why the world's economy is becoming better.
So why don't people see this?
It's complicated to look at an overall picture. Most people are more concerned with, getting their bills paid and getting their kids to the dentist and all all the other things in life. Politics is a dirty business. I mean, it is. I mean, sometimes when I get studying politics too much, I feel like I need to take a shower afterwards.
Yeah.
Because it can be pretty nasty. I'm understanding to people, and the answer is that's why we're here. Literally, that's why you and I are doing this show. We're here to tell people, open your eyes, look around. We're giving you these ideas to think about. Do a little reading on your own. Find out about things. If you're not part of a solution, you're part of a problem. Mm-hmm. And there is no such thing as a free lunch. Anybody who does a free lunch is doing it for a reason. There's always a reason behind it. If the government can't give you anything. The government can only take from one other person and give it to you until you get enough, and then they'll take it from you and give it to someone who's less than you. Governments don't have the ability to generate income. Only people and businesses generate income.
Now, it's my understanding that it used to be that people or churches, church organizations, just your neighbors would help those that need it. And now it looks like the government wants to do that for us by taking from someone who's built their wealth. I'm going to take it from you to give it to this less fortunate person that doesn't have the privilege that you have to bring them up to your level.
The idea of redistributing the wealth is the idea that you're right. A charity actually helps people. A government taking money to give to other people just simply creates a bureaucracy. And when it creates a bureaucracy, what is the definition of a charity? How much money do you actually get to the people you want? If the government takes your money and distributes to other people, 10% of it gets to the people and 90% of it goes to running the bureaucracy. We're a real charity. I used to do some work for the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army, 80% of the money they take in goes directly into helping people. They're a real live charity. Mm-hmm. Whereas compared to the Clinton Foundation, for example, is listed as a charity. When you check the Clinton Foundation's books, about 10 to 20% of their money actually went to people. 40% went to just general expenses, and the rest of it pretty much went to salary and other items. So they're taking in $500 million, whatever they were doing in the end, and they were only distributing out $50 million, $100 million, maybe. I mean, that strikes me as most businesses should be so lucky as to make that profit.
So isn't that just propaganda? I mean, how do you determine what's propaganda and what's not?
You always have to check your resources. I mean, whenever you read anything, the first question I always ask myself is, does this person have an agenda in what they're writing? You can go to neutral factors. I mean, if I want to look up tax information, there is tax information provided by the government that you can get, and business indexes and like that will tell you. You can look up every nonprofit in the world registers its information, and you're able to look at how they spend their money. So, I mean, it takes a little research to do it. Somebody will get mad at me because I'll say something bad about UNICEF. UNICEF is a charity, but it distributes only about 30% from last time I checked it, to maybe 40% of the money it takes in. So, I mean, it's a charity, but it's not a charity like the Salvation Army is, or like the American Red Cross is. 3/4 plus goes to directly help people. You find that a lot of those people don't have CEOs that are making millions of dollars in their salaries to run their companies. They may make hundreds of thousands, but they don't make millions. That's a big difference. You have to be willing to look at it. You have to be willing to do a little extra digging, or you have to be willing to tune in every Saturday and listen to our show, and we'll give them good information every time.
But what about when Google is withholding or filtering with your custom search results when you're trying to find something and they're burying it if it's even available, and you can't find that information? Where else can you go?
Well, there are other search engines. Mm-hmm. I mean, I use DuckDuckGo personally, which doesn't trace you and isn't affiliated with Google. I find sometimes I have to look a little longer because they don't have as big of a database. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't change the fact there are other search engines. I think what's going to happen with Google, and this is a question I want to ask Judge Jeanine about when we're talking to her about, there's a big antitrust, meaning breaking up a monopoly lawsuit going on amongst most of the states of this union's attorney generals against Google, which means they may want to break it into smaller companies because it doesn't allow for any competition. If that happens, I think in the long run, you'll get much better information. You may have to know this site leans left, this site leans right, and you'll look for the ones in the middle. Or again, that's always one way you can always tell. If the left agrees on it and the right agrees on it, it's probably true. Mm-hmm. Other than that, that's the 100% way, that almost 100% way you can always find a fact.
Let's talk about Google in the next segment leading up to our interview with Judge Jeanine.
Okay.
You're listening to Johnny and the Professor. Politics.
This is actually what makes this whole thing so comical.
Pop culture.
This is something that they're going to be prioritizing, and that is diversity. Now, this is stupid.
Common sense in senseless times. This is Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless times.
All of the people who are ascribed to this liberal, progressive ideology, the people at the pool who didn't like that you were reading my book, Deborah Messing, she's another Hollywood hypocrite. She wants to know who's attending a Trump fundraiser so that then they can let their producers know or directors know the people they don't want to work with. This is McCarthyism. We have free speech in this country. We are allowed to vote for whomever we want. But the hate is so intense. They have a plot to remake America, to shut down the right, to make sure that we can get as many legals coming in as 144,000 in 1 month. Give them a license and let them vote.
Contact the show at jpshowfm@gmail.com.
It's Johnny and the Professor, where we talk about politics, pop culture, and poinsettias, or poinsettia, what have you. So I wanted to talk to you real quick about Google.
Google restricting your internet searches. They're using their algorithms to point you in certain directions.
Right.
There's truth in that. When I do research lots of times, even when I'm using DuckDuckGo, I sometimes have to go 3 or 4 pages down to find something that isn't just New York Times, or because there's a massive saturation. It's very simple. Talk radio leans in the conservative side. Fox News leans on the conservative side. Everything else is left.
Why aren't there any shows on the left?
Is it interesting that there is not a lot of talk leftist show? I mean, Alan Combs had a show for a while, though he's passed away now, and it had some level of success. There are a few here and there, but there isn't a desire for it, because I don't think the people who embrace the leftist ideas need to be convinced of it. The people on the right are realizing that the left is the one that's attacking the rights of the right, so the right is much more likely to want to be talking about it and doing something about it. It used to be the other way around. I mean, in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, there was a lot of strong Christian coalitions that were trying to impede people's rights on a lot of issues that were probably unfair. And
the PMRC, is that one of them?
Yeah. So you ended with situations where freedom of speech was being put down by people on the right. But the thing is, and having learned from that, the left has taken it to the power of 10 on what was done in the late 80s. I mean, it's the reason if you put down all speech, then therefore only your message, only your narrative comes out. And since Google's run by a bunch of people in Silicon Valley, they're all aligned with the left, so they're going to have their algorithms, and they're going to say they don't, and they're lying through their teeth. I don't care what they say, because if it takes me 4 pages to find one article that has something that is neutral in it, then you are not giving us accurate information. It's going to have to be dealt with. Americans are being manipulated by it, and we talk about Russian collusion against our election. How about Google's collusion against our election?
Right.
Is social media, because it has a political bend to the left, is it trying to influence illegally our elections by giving misinformation and tainting the information that's put out in a way that looks bad for conservative candidates? And if you're doing that's election manipulation. That's illegal, as surely as if the Russians were doing it in the Ukraine or whatever.
I still get a kick out of all of the elections the United States has interfered in, but we don't really talk about that.
Between 1946 and 2000, the United States has committed electoral misconduct in at least 81 elections across 45 countries. Now, that's 22% of the world, according to researchers at Carnegie Mellon University. This includes elections in Iran, Guatemala, Yugoslavia, and Chile, to name a few, and it does not include any attempts for coups or regime change, which would bring that number even higher. Even after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the U.S. has continued its electoral misconduct.
Well, a lot of the times it's done simply by money. I mean, again, Barack Obama tried to directly interfere in Netanyahu's re-election by sending money over into the oppositions. That is even a fact even the left has to admit to now. The mistake they made is they were doing it to Israel, and Israel will point a finger and say, you're doing it.
Is there any data or info a person could find on Barack Obama silencing journalists and reporters?
Oh, sure. There was Brett Baer was one of the ones who was directly attacked by the intelligence community because for doing anti-Obama stories. You can go back and do research on it. It'd be easy to find it on Fox News sites because logically he's a Fox News reporter. I mean, Obama's administration used the IRS to restrict conservative organizations, not allowing them to have their status as nonprofits. They slowed down their methods of filing, and because they didn't like them. They were saying Barack Obama had a scandal-free presidency. That's a lot of nonsense. The IRS thing was a huge scandal. People resigned, and it still hasn't been resolved. I mean, again, Fast and the Furious are selling weapons. That's a scandal for Obama. Again, censoring of news media. That was a part of it too. So there's plenty. I mean, most presidents do have their scandals. I can give you ones for George Bush too. But to tell me that for somehow that Obama is this angelic president, I've mentioned before.
Nobody said George Bush had a
scandal-free too. Everyone assumed Bush had, and then again, Scooter Libby went to jail because of a special prosecutor in that case, and now we're back to Mueller again because he was the one involved in it then. And the issue was just the doxing, the equivalent of doxing of an agent that didn't even actually happen. But he was going after Dick Cheney is what he was going after, and then Scooter Libby took the bullet for Cheney.
See, and that's one thing that I don't like or agree with when it comes to the right or conservatives or whatever you want to call it, was this whole Halliburton thing.
Oh, yeah.
Dick Cheney's role and his position.
You mean Darth Cheney?
Right. It just boggles my mind that...
Well, I'm not going to tell you the Republicans are not without scandals. By no means. I mean, most Republicans have gotten involved in scandals. Some have been for the good reasons, like you could argue Iran-Contra and Ronald Reagan. He actually was trying to help the Sandinistas in dealing with the situations of freedom fighting in there, and he used money. You could argue it was a scandal, but he was maybe doing it for the right reason. Halliburton is just greed. You know what I mean? It's all it comes down to. And again, too many Republicans are like William Howard Taft, who is a 300-pound Republican who was into big business and padding people's pockets. The president before him was Theodore Roosevelt, who was a Republican who broke trusts and ended monopolies and labor laws for people and wanted to give Americans a square deal. Good Republicans want to be like Roosevelt, not like Taft. And unfortunately, Dick Cheney and George Bush, those are bought and paid for Taft type of Republicans. They're the big business Republicans. And they're the ones now that are Bill Kristol screaming in the wilderness against Donald Trump. All those who fall into the anti-Trumpers categories because they can't get as much of they can't get their hands in the pie anymore because Trump doesn't allow it.
Draining the swamp?
Trump is literally trying to drain the swamp. I know people they think I'm too pro-Trump. I just look at the situations. When I have conservatives that don't like Trump and liberals and leftists that don't like Trump, he must be doing something right. Because if both sides don't like you, then you're doing something right.
Okay, let's shift gears here just real quick. Do you want to know what I heard?
Okay, well then, tell me what you heard.
This is what I heard. I heard they're in talks to cast Liam Neeson as Galactus.
I don't know who you are. I can tell you I don't have money, but what I do have are a very particular set of skills. I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
Galactus is a being that consumes entire planets for energy to survive.
And Liam Neeson, I hear they're talking to him to play that role, and he's going to be an even cooler and more powerful bad guy than Thanos was.
Galactus is leaps and bounds more powerful than Thanos in the comics. In the Fantastic Four, The Rise of the Silver Surfer movie, they had Galactus in that, and they represented it as just like a force, like a cloud of energy. But when the Surfer flew in the end of the movie into it, you could see like a shape of a form. And that's the Galactus. They're going to basically have Galactus being incarnated as a physical being because he's a being of pure energy. It'll be all CGI, and Liam Neeson will do the voice, just like he was Aslan from the Narnia, which is even more powerful because Aslan is supposed to be God. So anyway,
that's all I had right now. I'll have more next week as we're getting closer to the Rise of Skywalker, as we're getting into the Phase 4 of Marvel. But don't you have something coming up?
Yes, I'm going to be emceeing the Mosaic in Motion. It's a dance recital that's held at the VFW in Aberdeen, which is at the corner of Heron and Market.
Are you going to be dancing?
I'm not going to be dancing. No. But there are laws against that in this state. But it's at 7 p.m. It's dance troupes from all over the area. We have line dancers, we have Irish dancing, we have our local belly dancing troupe is Kaleidoscope Belly Dance, which, full disclosure, my wife is one of the members of and organizers of it. And then we also have another group coming in, which is Masuda dancers. They're actually from Olympia. They're what's considered Middle Eastern belly dance, whereas Kaleidoscope is considered contemporary fusion belly dance. And they go, well, that sounds really weird. What that means is Masuda dances to Middle Eastern music. Kaleidoscope dances to anything they feel like. One of their best pieces is to Santana Smooth. I mean, I love watching that they do. And so I'm going to be the master of ceremony over there. The VFW keeps their kitchen open, and you can buy food, so you can have dinner and a show. And the price is free.
All right.
So, other than that, it's just my normal, YouTube channel. And I guess we should tell that we have Johnny and the Professor now has a YouTube channel. Two of our last couple shows are posted up there as audio for people to listen to.
Ryan Johnson is making more excuses for The Last Jedi by saying that everyone hated Empire Strikes Back when that came out.
No, they didn't.
I know, and everybody knows that, but he says, yeah, everybody hated it. I hated it when I went and saw it with my parents, and everybody else hated it. My movie's just as great as The Empire Strikes Back, and, people say they hate it now, but they're going to say they love it in 20 years like they do Empire. That's what he's insinuating. That's what he's getting to.
I can say that's leftist revisionist history. He's doing the big lie. Right. I'm going to tell the lie, and if I say it enough, people have to believe it's true, even though it's the
party switched. They switched. Exactly. There was this great big switch.
My opinion on that is that's a director who doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground and is trying to lie his way out of the fact that he did probably the worst Star Wars movie ever.
Well, moving right along, we have the host of Justice with Judge Jeanine on Fox News. Previously, she hosted Judge Jeanine Pirro, syndicated court show, which she won an Emmy. The first woman to sit on the Westchester County Court bench in '93. She again made history as the first woman elected district attorney in Westchester. Prosecutor, you received national recognition for founding one of the nation's first domestic violence units, and you have tirelessly crusaded on behalf of the silent victims of violent crime. Judge Jeanine Pirro, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with you.
I just finished your book, and I very much enjoyed it. I was doing some research before this, and that in the first week that your book came out, it sold 27,000 copies. And it's, of course, Radicals, Resistance, and Revenge is what the title is. And yet the New York Times bestseller list wouldn't put you as number one, even though you had sold more than anyone else. I thought that was hilarious because part of your book was talking about the bias of the press against conservatives, and they literally proved your point.
Well, they absolutely proved my point. And the fake news is out there day and night. And, I don't really care about whether I'm number one or not number one, but, when you have such an objective criteria where there's really no discussion as to who sold more, like numbers don't lie, it's almost humorous that they are willing, to put everything on the line and to put people above you who, where you sold 3 times, like Michelle Obama. Sold 9,000 copies. But, the truth is, I'm glad people are buying the book. There's a message there. And on a somber day like today, when we realize how important our freedoms are and how many people would prefer, that this country not have the freedoms that we have, I think it's important to look at everything that's happening, and that's why I wrote Radicals, Resistance, and Revenge, the left's plot to remake America. We are constantly being told that we can't say things a certain way or we can't say things at all. And it is, a violation of everyone's First Amendment rights when they don't have free speech. And unfortunately, with the left, we're seeing it on more and more because in the end, people are losing their jobs. People are being told they can't say things. You can't speak at universities. You're taken off of Facebook and Twitter if you're on the right. And then they send in Antifa, a bunch of cowards in ninja outfits, who want to beat you up because you're on the right. And then the police stand down and don't make an arrest because they're ordered to not make arrests. I mean, there's a lot going on with the Constitution, the presumption of innocence. And our job is to just be vigilant to make sure we always have the rights that we are, that are in the Constitution. We can never give that up.
It seems like so many want to give that up. They say things like, oh, the Constitution's an outdated document, or the founders that drafted the Constitution, they were outdated and they were a bunch of racists and they suck. And how do you combat that?
Well, it's very simple. I mean, the Constitution is the law of the land. If this is a democracy, actually a republic, and, they can't just come in and upend it. Now what they're trying to say is, look, we don't want the Electoral College anymore. It's an outdated concept. No, it isn't. You lost the election, and, this is all about the radicals and their revenge for losing the election in 2016. Look, they couldn't drag Hillary Clinton across the presidential finish line, and they've been resisting and full of revenge ever since. The truth is that we have open borders now, and the liberals want that. I want you to think about this. Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Chuck Schumer, none of them believed in open borders and having illegals just come through this country. But all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, oh, yeah, we need to let everybody in. Why do you think that is? I'm going to tell you why. It's because they need the numbers. They need people to vote for them because they know that they have lost the heart of America. And so if they can get people here who are illegal, who are clearly going to vote Democrat, and give them licenses, which they're touting, then they can use that license as a point of identification to then vote. It's all about power. It was like that seminal moment with Lindsey Graham during the Kavanaugh hearings when he said, you want power so badly, I hope you never get it. And that's what we're seeing today. All of these changes on the part of the Democrats, it's all about power. And when there's a nominee for the United States Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, who's the closest thing to an altar boy that I've seen in my adult life, and the truth is they say he's a gang rapist, and he's not entitled to the presumption of innocence. And a United States Senator, this Mazie Hirono, she says all women need to be believed and men should just shut up. Well, that's not the Constitution. There's a presumption of innocence. But no, Brett Kavanaugh's a gang rapist. And, it just goes on. And that's why I believe that it's very important to not fall into their trap of political correctness, which is the enemy of free speech, of getting rid of law and order and respect for law enforcement. I mean, that's not the America that has been so successful, whose economy is soaring, and, that we are privileged to live in.
Judge, can I ask you, when I was reading your book, one of the parts I thought was very interesting was dealing with the tech industries. And I was wondering, recently there has been a antitrust suit that's been put out by virtually every state in the United States against Google. And I was wondering, what can the United States actually do to regulate the tech industry to make sure that it's actually allowing freedom of speech?
That it's actually allowing people, say it again?
Actually allowing people to have true freedom of speech.
One of the things that's got to be done is they've got to recognize, and I think they already do, because you've got 26 attorneys general, or maybe 36, I think, bipartisan from both sides of the aisle, who are looking to join the Fed in a lawsuit to make it clear that, this is something that they may have to, regulate, because there is so much pushback on people's First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, and privacy. I mean, the privacy issue is an enormous issue that, unfortunately, is not being respected by a lot of these big companies, like Google and Facebook, who are taking conservatives off of their website all the time for things that they call, hate speech. And, the Supreme Court has been very clear that, First Amendment free speech covers hate speech. That's the whole point. That's the whole reason you have a First Amendment, is that it's not just speech that everyone agrees with. The First Amendment is there, according to the Supreme Court, to protect speech that not everybody agrees with. Yet the left is determined to, cut back on free speech of anyone on the right, not let them speak at universities, And it then filters through Facebook and Twitter in the way they're treating people on the right. So there's a lot of issues that have to be addressed, and I think that everyone recognizes that these organizations are way, way big. And the last time something like this happened where the AGs joined the federal government was in the breakup of Microsoft.
And that's what I was wondering about, is the method of attacking Google using the Sherman Antitrust Act, just going back to the fact that it is a monopoly, that it is a trust, and it goes across straight voters and impedes competition.
Yes, I think that's a part of it. I mean, because, we all use that because, there's nowhere else to go. So we're all addicted to social media, and we just assume that, they got to be protecting us. But in the end, we're not so sure, So the book talks about all of the changes that the left is trying to make. They even want socialism. Bernie Sanders in 2011 actually had on his website that Venezuela was a perfect example of the success of socialism, except now, they're eating zoo animals and women are giving birth on the side of the road.
I don't think he's saying that anymore, no.
So there's a lot of different things going on right now.
How can a conservative or just a logical thinker fight back against this insanity?
Well, I think in this country it's always been about the ballot box. And, I'm concerned about elections, not just 2020, but how about this year in 2019? The Democrat Socialist Party is funding candidates around the country with individuals, who are getting elected local levels, school board levels, town, village, cities. And a lot of people aren't aware of their actual, what their actual ideology is. So people need to ask questions. People need to be sure that they know who they're voting for. For district attorney, for example. I mean, I was a DA for 3 decades, and a DA and assistant DA, obviously. And, you can't have a DA who believes that every criminal should be ROR'd, because if that's the case, they're never coming back. And it makes it dangerous for society as a whole. And, it's about the election, and it's about making sure that we get in people that we believe, are going to be true to the Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Look, we don't want more than anyone else has, but what we want is the ability to speak freely and to take care of our families. And this whole idea of socialism and Medicare for illegals, they're saying in California, the Californians have to pay for health care for the illegals, and then they have to pay for health care for themselves. I mean, this is lunacy. People can barely afford what they're doing already, and the left is just making sure that they bring in more and more people to try to upend the system. And that can't work. It's not going to work. And on a day like today, when we realize how precious America is, more than ever, we should realize that there's so much to fight for and so much to be thankful for.
Well, Judge, we don't want to take up too much of your time. We appreciate the time that you've given us today. But
Thank you.
The book is called Radicals, Resistance, and Revenge, The Left's Plot to Remake America. Go out, get that book, learn something, right, Judge?
Yeah, actually, there's 30 pages of footnotes in the back. And, when I was in law school, on law review, I hated footnotes. But if you're in a disagreement with someone and you need to know the facts, just check that book. It's all in there. I put my evidence where my allegations are, just like I do on my show.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of Johnny and the Professor. If you'd like to contact us, send us questions, comments, complaints, email jpshowfm@gmail.com.
And, of course, you can go on to YouTube and look for Arena of History, and I have posted the Johnny and the Professor audios up there, and we now have a Johnny and the Professor YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and do a search for it, and you'll find it right away.
This has been Johnny and the Professor. Politics.
CNN President Jeff Zucker actually ordered his reporters to get off real news and back to Russia. Never mind that the core story is untrue, because, hey, it's a cash cow.
Pop culture.
Where the most optimistic guy in the galaxy becomes a suicidal, cranky old man telling people to get off his lawn.
Contact the show at jpshowfm@gmail.com. Johnny and the Professor. Common sense in senseless times.